After spending a day here in Dingboche, it was time to move up the valley to Lukla. The track this morning was pretty easy, and having recovered from yesterday's challenging ascent of Nangka Chang, my body was feeling much better today. We had already heard many stories of people getting evacuated due to altitude sickness, and we have heard evacuation helicopters many times. Views keep getting better every day. All morning as we hiked up the valley, we were surrounded by amazing peaks. We took an early lunch at Lukla, which prepared us for the ascent of Lukla Pass. The climb is over 400 meters to the top. At the top is a memorial to many of the lost climbers that have fallen victim to Everest's danger. The rest of the hike to Lukla was pretty flat. The terrain, however, was simply breathtaking. It was an early start today from Lukla. We were headed for Everest Base Camp. The water around the village was covered in ice when we left. Fortunately, we were all well prepared for the conditions. Today's walk would take us north all day, walking alongside the Khumbu Glacier. The walk didn't climb any great heights, but the constant incline and high altitude made it slow going. Fortunately, there was the distraction of these amazing views all morning. Long before getting to base camp, we were already blessed with this view of the Khumbu Glacier, and at its source, the infamous Khumbu Icefall. We arrived in Gorakshep late morning. This is the final town before Everest Base Camp. We dropped our gear here, had some lunch and then prepared for the trip out to the base campsite. We were all very excited, and hearing stories from many people had us more eager to hit the road. In particular, an Australian tourist named Alan was having his third attempt at making it to base camp. We slowly walked along the trail towards base camp, getting closer to the glacier all the time. Eventually, we dropped down off the scree to the side and walked along the icy glacier itself. And then finally, we made it to base camp. Although this spot is still a short distance from the main camp, we could see the glacier, we could see the amazing ice fall, and we were able to cross off another of the major destinations of this trip. After spending some time here, we wandered back to Gorakshep. We were passing people heading to base camp most of the way back to Gorakshep, but we arrived back safely before the sun started going down, and settled in for a relaxing evening. Our last activity here in the heart of Everest country was to climb to the top of Kalapata. This peak, that sits behind Gorakshep, will be the greatest altitude we have reached so far on this trip, a total of 5,500 meters. Most hikers will make this ascent in the early hours of the morning. They love to get the sunrise over Everest photos. We were not so keen on that, and left well after sunup. The climb was very difficult, but we could definitely feel the improvement in our body's ability to cope with low oxygen. Good news for our next adventure climbing Island Peak. With the tallest peaks in the world spread out around us, the views were incredible everywhere we looked. We eventually reached the peak of Kalapata and took some time to soak in the amazing location. After descending back to a reasonable altitude, we headed back towards Lukla. Walking downhill was definitely easier. Arriving at Lukla, I remember being terribly exhausted. We rested for a while before the group decided to push on further to Lukla for the night. Passing through Lukla Pass again, in the opposite direction, provided some amazing views. The following day, we separated from the boys and headed back towards Dingbochi, then continued up the valley towards Chakhung, which is the staging area for all ascents of Island Peak. This lodge was one of the best we had stayed in, but incredibly disappointing in that it was almost totally empty. We had a rest day here though, preparing our bodies for the torturous challenge of climbing Island Peak.